Caleb Brooks was 39, a mechanic at a high-end dealership, and a father before he was anything else. Every morning before sunrise, he packed Maya's lunch, braided her hair, checked her homework, then drove his old pickup through the waking city with coffee going cold in the cup holder. At work, men in pressed shirts called him the garage guy, as if grease on his hands meant there was nothing behind his eyes. Caleb never corrected them. He had learned that dignity did not need an audience. That Friday, fluorescent lights buzzed over chrome hoods and polished showroom glass while rain tapped softly against the windows. Maya sat in the waiting corner with her backpack against her knees, coloring a school project because childcare had fallen through again. Caleb kept one eye on her and one hand inside the engine bay of a black SUV that had been rushed in before noon. Then Evelyn Hart walked in wearing a tailored red dress beneath a cream coat, her heels clicking against the marble floor like punctuation. Everyone straightened. The manager nearly ran to greet her. She was elegant, controlled, and visibly used to rooms adjusting around her. Her eyes passed over Caleb's worn boots, his oil-stained sleeves, the lunchbox beside his toolbox. "Please tell me he isn't the one touching my car," she said, not loudly, but loud enough. The showroom went still. Caleb lifted his head slowly. Maya stopped coloring. Something felt wrong. The manager laughed too quickly and promised her the best technician was on it. Evelyn's gaze sharpened, guarded and cold. "I asked for certified service, not guesswork." Caleb wiped his hands on an old rag, folded it once, and set it beside the toolbox. No anger crossed his face. Only a quiet pause, the kind that made people uncomfortable because it gave them time to hear themselves. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "I'll step back if that's what you prefer." He started to close the hood. Then he noticed it. A faint ticking beneath the engine noise. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just off. Caleb looked at the SUV again, then at the rain streaking down the glass. "But you shouldn't drive this out yet." Evelyn's expression tightened. "And why is that?" A salesman smirked behind her. Caleb did not look at him. "Because something in that vehicle is trying to fail quietly." The words landed strangely. Evelyn looked annoyed, but not untouched. Men had spoken over her for years in boardrooms. This man was not doing that. He was simply telling the truth. Maya slid off her chair and walked toward the open hood, clutching her crayon drawing. "Daddy hears cars like music," she said softly. "He knows when one note is wrong." A few people chuckled. Caleb gave her a gentle look that said, "Not now, baby." But Evelyn heard it. She kept watching. "Before we go deeper into what he discovered that day, tell us where you're watching from and do not forget to subscribe, because what happened next changed the way everyone looked at him." Caleb crouched by the front tire, careful, calm, focused. He asked for no permission now, only space. Evelyn stood behind the glass wall of the service bay, arms folded, expensive perfume faint in the air, but her confidence had shifted by an inch. Not softened. Not yet. Just unsettled. Caleb reached into the old toolbox he carried from job to job, the one with a cracked leather handle and his father's initials scratched near the latch. He pulled out a small inspection mirror, then froze. Under the SUV, wedged near the brake line, was a folded service tag with a name written across it in blue ink. Evelyn saw his face change. Not fear. Recognition. Caleb looked back toward Maya, then toward Evelyn, and for the first time that day, his voice dropped lower. "Miss Hart," he said, "who worked on this car before it came here?" Evelyn stepped closer to the glass, her polished mask thinning. Maya looked at the tag in her father's hand and whispered, "Daddy, that's the same name from your old letter." The service bay grew quieter after Maya whispered those words. Even the salesman near the coffee station stopped pretending not to listen. Caleb stared at the folded service tag in his hand for half a second too long. That was all Evelyn noticed, but it was enough. She stepped through the glass doors into the garage, the sharp scent of rain and motor oil wrapping around her expensive coat. "What letter?" she asked carefully. Maya looked up at her father first. "Always him first." Caleb straightened slowly, slipping the tag into his palm before anyone else could read it clearly. "Just something from a long time ago," he said. His voice stayed calm, but his shoulders tightened beneath the faded work shirt. Evelyn noticed that too. People in her world lied loudly. Caleb hid things quietly. There was a difference. The manager forced a nervous laugh. "Sir, if the customer is uncomfortable, maybe we should move this along." Caleb nodded once. No argument. No wounded pride. "You are right." He turned back toward the SUV and reached beneath the hood again, movement steady, precise. Rain tapped harder against the high windows now, soft piano music drifting from the showroom speakers like something too elegant for the grease-stained floor beneath their feet. Maya returned to her chair but kept watching her father with complete trust. That trust unsettled Evelyn more than the mechanic himself. Children noticed things adults buried. Caleb disconnected a panel near the engine and held up a damaged line hidden deep behind the housing. "This should not look like this on a vehicle less than 2 years old," he said. The manager frowned. "Manufacturing issue?" Caleb did not answer immediately. He studied the part again. Then he noticed another detail. A cut too clean to be accidental. His eyes narrowed slightly. "No," he said quietly. "Not manufacturing." Evelyn crossed her arms tighter. "Are you saying someone tampered with my car?" A few employees exchanged uneasy looks. Caleb wiped his hands slowly with the old rag from his toolbox. "I am saying somebody worked on this vehicle who should not have touched it." Silence settled over the garage. Heavy this time. Evelyn glanced toward the service office where paperwork sat stacked beneath fluorescent light. "My assistant scheduled everything through your dealership," she said sharply toward the manager. "So how exactly does something like this happen?" The manager immediately started blaming inventory delays, subcontractors, scheduling confusion. Excuses spilled fast. Caleb stayed out of it. He simply kept inspecting the engine with the patience of a man used to carrying problems that belonged to other people. Evelyn watched him from a few feet away now. Up close, she noticed details she had missed before. The careful way he organized every tool. The lunchbox sitting unopened beside the toolbox because he had not stopped working long enough to eat. The tiny pink sticker on his wrench that probably belonged to Maya. None of it matched the version of him she had assumed in the first 30 seconds. Something inside her shifted uncomfortably. Not guilt yet. Awareness. Then Maya spoke again from the corner. "Daddy skipped dinner last night fixing Mrs. Alvarez's truck for free." Caleb gave her a tired look. "Baby." "What?" she asked innocently. "You said helping people matters." Evelyn lowered her eyes for the first time since entering the garage. The rain outside blurred the city lights into soft silver streaks across the glass. Caleb finally closed the hood halfway and exhaled slowly. "Miss Hart," he said, "you should not drive this vehicle tonight." "And if I have somewhere important to be?" she asked. Caleb met her gaze directly then. Not challenging. Not submissive. Just honest. "Then I will stay late and fix it." Evelyn blinked. "After the way I spoke to you? Your safety is still your safety." The words landed harder than she expected. She looked at the grease on his hands again, but this time she noticed how carefully he kept those same hands away from her coat, her car, her space. Like respect had become instinct for him. Then the service office printer suddenly spat out another repair invoice onto the counter behind them. Caleb turned casually toward the paper. But the second he saw the printed signature at the bottom, the color in his face changed. Because it was the exact same name from the old letter hidden inside his apartment drawer. Caleb stared at the printed signature while the noise of the dealership faded into something distant and hollow. The fluorescent lights above him hummed softly. Rain rolled down the tall showroom windows in silver lines. Somewhere near the reception desk, a coffee machine hissed. Ordinary sounds. But his chest tightened anyway. The name on the invoice was Daniel Mercer. Evelyn noticed the shift immediately. "You know him," she said quietly. Caleb folded the invoice once and handed it back without answering. That silence told her enough. The manager stepped in quickly, voice defensive now. "Daniel is one of our outside specialists. He has worked with premium clients for years." Caleb's jaw moved slightly. Not anger. Restraint. He looked toward Maya before speaking again, as if making sure his daughter stayed outside whatever memory had suddenly entered the room. "When was the last time he touched this vehicle?" The manager checked the paperwork nervously. 3 weeks ago. Caleb nodded slowly, eyes lowered to the engine again. Then this damage did not happen by accident. Evelyn crossed her arms tighter against herself. Not for warmth. For control. "You are speaking very carefully," she said. Caleb wiped grease from his fingers with the old rag. "Careful keeps people employed." The sentence hung in the air longer than expected. Even the manager stopped talking. Maya sat quietly now, sensing the tension without understanding it fully. She hugged her backpack close to her chest and watched her father the way children watch storms through windows. Caleb moved around the SUV again, checking another panel beneath the hood. His movements stayed steady, practiced, almost military in their precision. Evelyn noticed that too. There was discipline in him that did not belong to an ordinary mechanic. The thought unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. "Who is Daniel Mercer?" she asked finally. Caleb paused for half a second. "A man who used to promise people things." "That does not answer my question." "It is the only answer I have tonight." He closed the panel carefully. "Not slammed. Never slammed." The manager forced another nervous smile and tried to redirect the conversation toward repair costs and schedules, but Evelyn barely listened. Her eyes stayed on Caleb. Earlier, she had only seen grease stains and worn boots. Now she saw restraint under pressure. Quiet intelligence. The kind of sadness people carried only after surviving disappointment too many times. Something inside her resisted that realization. Because it meant she had judged him in less than 30 seconds. Caleb finally stepped back from the SUV. "I can repair enough for you to drive safely tonight," he said. "But the rest needs a deeper inspection." Evelyn studied him carefully. "And if I ask for someone else?" Caleb gave a small nod. "That is your right. No bitterness. No wounded ego. Just truth." That made it worse somehow. Outside, thunder rolled softly across the city skyline. The showroom lights reflected against the wet parking lot where Caleb's old pickup sat beside rows of luxury cars worth more than his yearly salary. The contrast would have embarrassed some men. Not him. Maya suddenly walked over holding her drawing in both hands. "Daddy," she whispered, tugging his sleeve gently. Caleb crouched beside her immediately. Always immediately. "What is it, baby?" She pointed toward the invoice still sitting on the counter. "That is the same man from the picture Mom used to hide." Caleb froze completely this time. Evelyn saw it happen. A real crack in his calm. Small, but undeniable. Maya realized too late she had said something important. Her little eyes widened. "I am sorry," she whispered quickly. Caleb softened at once and touched her shoulder gently. "You did nothing wrong." But Evelyn kept staring at him now. Because for the first time since entering the dealership, the polished billionaire saw something beneath the mechanic's quiet composure. Not weakness. History. And whatever history Caleb Brooks had with Daniel Mercer, it was clearly not over. The rain had slowed to a soft drizzle by the time the dealership began closing for the night. Salesmen disappeared first, carrying expensive umbrellas toward polished sedans. The marble showroom dimmed row by row until only the service bay lights remained glowing over Caleb and the black SUV. Evelyn stayed longer than she intended. That alone irritated her. She was not used to lingering around people beneath her schedule. But every time she started walking toward the exit, she found herself looking back through the glass wall at Caleb working in silence. He had rolled up his sleeves now, revealing tired forearms lined with old scars from years of labor. Nothing dramatic. Just the quiet marks of a man who fixed things for a living. Maya sat on a stool nearby eating crackers from her lunchbox while doing homework under the fluorescent light. Every few minutes Caleb glanced toward her automatically. Protective without effort. Like breathing. Evelyn noticed that too. "You really brought your daughter to work all day?" she asked finally from the doorway. Caleb did not stop tightening the part in his hand. "School ended at 3. My sitter cancelled. And this was your only option?" "It was the best one I had." Again, no shame in the answer. Just truth. Evelyn leaned lightly against the doorway, expensive heels inches from oil-stained concrete. The contrast between them suddenly felt impossible to ignore. "Most people would have complained," she said quietly. Caleb gave the faintest shrug. "Complaining does not help with homework." Maya smiled at that without looking up from her worksheet. The sound of her small laugh softened the room for half a second. Then silence returned. Caleb moved around the SUV with focused precision, checking the repaired line once more before reconnecting the housing. Evelyn watched his hands carefully now. Earlier she had called them filthy. Now she noticed how gentle those same hands were with every machine, every tool, every person near him. Something about that realization sat heavily in her chest. She hated that feeling. "You still have not explained why my car scares you," she said after a moment. Caleb finally stood upright and wiped his hands slowly with the rag hanging from his pocket. "Because someone wanted the damage hidden long enough for you to drive." Evelyn's expression hardened immediately. "You are serious?" "Yes, ma'am." "And this Daniel Mercer," Caleb looked away briefly toward the rain-speckled windows. "He used to work with my wife." The sentence came quietly. Controlled. But Evelyn heard the grief beneath it anyway. Caleb almost never spoke about his wife anymore. Even Maya lowered her eyes when her mother was mentioned. The air changed. Softer. Sadder. Evelyn's voice lowered without meaning to. "What happened to her?" Caleb reached for a wrench simply to keep his hands moving. "Cancer." One word. No performance. No invitation for pity. Just a fact carried too long. Evelyn swallowed carefully. She suddenly became aware of the warmth inside the garage, the smell of motor oil mixed with coffee gone cold, the child coloring quietly in the corner while her father worked overtime to protect a woman who had insulted him less than 2 hours earlier. The thought unsettled her deeply. Maya slid off the stool and walked toward the toolbox carrying her finished drawing. "I made us," she said proudly to Evelyn before Caleb could stop her. The drawing showed Caleb beside the SUV, Maya holding his hand, and a tall blonde woman standing nearby under falling rain. Evelyn stared at the crayon figure that was clearly meant to be her. "You drew me?" she asked softly. Maya nodded. "Daddy says people can change after one good moment." Caleb closed his eyes briefly like a man too tired to interrupt anymore. Evelyn looked at him differently after that. Not as a mechanic. Not even as the father she had slowly begun respecting. But as someone carrying a kind of strength she had not seen in years. Then Caleb reached beneath the SUV one final time and pulled free a tiny black device attached near the brake housing. His expression darkened immediately. Evelyn stepped closer. "What is that?" Caleb turned the object over once in his grease-stained hand. "A tracking device. And suddenly the quiet garage no longer felt safe at all. The tiny black device rested in Caleb's palm like something poisonous. The fluorescent lights reflected faintly across its smooth surface while rain whispered against the dealership windows. Evelyn stepped closer instinctively, her expensive coat brushing against the edge of the workbench. "That was attached to my car," she asked quietly. Caleb nodded once. "Recently?" Maya looked between them with growing confusion. "Like in spy movies?" she whispered. Caleb immediately softened his expression for her sake. "Probably not that dramatic, baby." But Evelyn noticed he never actually answered the question. The manager approached carefully now, his confidence completely gone. "Sir, maybe we should call security." Caleb looked toward the empty showroom beyond the glass walls. Most of the staff had already left. The building suddenly felt too large. Too quiet. "No," he said calmly. "Not yet." Evelyn frowned. "Why not?" Caleb turned the device over once more. "Because if somebody wanted this hidden, I would rather know who notices it missing." The sentence landed heavily between them. Evelyn stared at him differently again. Earlier she had seen a mechanic. Then a father. Now she saw something sharper beneath the surface. A man who noticed patterns other people missed. Caleb placed the tracker carefully into a small plastic container from his toolbox, sealing it without another word. His movements stayed controlled, but internally his thoughts had already started connecting pieces he wished were unrelated. Daniel Mercer. The damaged brake line. His late wife's hidden photograph. Nothing felt random anymore. And he hated that feeling. Maya tugged gently on his sleeve. "Daddy, can we go home soon?" Caleb crouched beside her immediately. "Soon, baby. You said we would watch that science show tonight." Caleb smiled softly despite the tension pulling at his face. "We still will." Evelyn watched the exchange in silence. No matter how uneasy the room became, Caleb's attention always returned to his daughter first. That consistency affected her more than charm ever could. Most men around her performed kindness when it benefited them. Caleb treated tenderness like responsibility. The manager cleared his throat nervously. "Miss Hart, I can arrange another vehicle tonight." Evelyn barely looked at him. No, her eyes stayed on Caleb. "I want him finishing the repairs." The manager blinked in surprise. So did Caleb. Evelyn noticed that too. "You trust me now?" he asked carefully. She crossed her arms, though there was less armor in the gesture than before. "I trust that you are the only person here actually paying attention." Silence followed. A strange silence this time. Less hostile. More uncertain. Caleb returned to the SUV and continued working beneath the hood while Evelyn remained nearby instead of retreating to the customer lounge. Her phone vibrated twice in her purse. She ignored it both times. Outside, city lights shimmered across the wet pavement where Caleb's old truck sat alone at the far edge of the parking lot. Maya wandered closer to Evelyn holding her crayons. "Do rich people always smell like flowers?" she asked innocently. Caleb almost dropped the wrench in his hand. "Maya." But Evelyn laughed softly before she could stop herself. The sound surprised all three of them. Even her. "Only when they are overcharged for perfume," she replied. Maya grinned immediately. Caleb glanced toward Evelyn then, and for the first time all night, the corner of his mouth moved slightly too. Small. Tired. Real. Something shifted in the garage after that moment. Not romance. Not trust. Just the fragile beginning of two people seeing each other clearly. Then the front entrance doors suddenly slid open with a low mechanical hum. Cold night air swept into the showroom. A tall man in an expensive charcoal coat stepped inside holding an umbrella dripping rainwater onto the marble floor. Caleb froze before the man even spoke. Because he recognized the walk first. Daniel Mercer smiled the second he spotted Evelyn near the service bay. Then his eyes landed on Caleb. And the smile disappeared completely. The air inside the dealership changed the moment Daniel Mercer walked in. Rainwater dripped from the edge of his umbrella onto the marble floor while the automatic doors hissed shut behind him. He looked polished in the effortless way expensive men often did. Sharp coat. Silver watch. Calm smile practiced enough to survive boardrooms and betrayals alike. But when his eyes landed on Caleb, something flickered beneath that smooth surface. Recognition. Unease. Gone almost instantly. Evelyn, Daniel said warmly, shifting his attention toward her with professional ease. I heard your vehicle had trouble. Evelyn glanced between both men carefully now. You heard quickly. Daniel smiled faintly. Your assistant called my office. I was nearby. Caleb lowered the hood of the SUV slowly, the metallic click echoing softly through the quiet garage. He said nothing. That silence bothered Daniel more than anger would have. Maya instinctively moved closer to her father's side. Children always sense tension before adults admitted it existed. Daniel's eyes drifted toward her briefly. Then back to Caleb. It has been a long time, he said carefully. Caleb wiped his hands with the old rag hanging from his pocket. Not long enough. The manager suddenly became very interested in organizing paperwork across the service counter. Evelyn noticed that too. Everyone in the room understood there was history standing in front of them now. The kind people avoided discussing directly. Daniel stepped closer toward the SUV, trying to regain control of the moment. I can take over from here, he said smoothly to Evelyn. Caleb and I used to work together years ago. Caleb's jaw tightened slightly. That is one way to describe it. Evelyn crossed her arms again, but this time her posture leaned subtly toward Caleb instead of away from him. A detail Daniel noticed immediately. Your mechanic believes someone tampered with my vehicle, she said calmly. Daniel looked almost amused. That sounds dramatic. Caleb reached into the toolbox and calmly placed the small black tracker onto the workbench between them. The smile disappeared from Daniel's face for the second time that night. Only for a second. But Caleb saw it. So did Evelyn. Found underneath the brake housing, Caleb said quietly. Daniel stared at the device before giving a soft laugh that sounded too measured. You can buy those online for $20. You can, Caleb agreed. Question is why somebody attached one to her car. Silence settled again. Rain tapped steadily against the windows while distant thunder rolled somewhere beyond the skyline. Evelyn watched both men carefully now. Daniel stood polished and composed beneath the bright showroom lights. Caleb stood exhausted in an oil-stained shirt beside his old toolbox. But strangely, only one of them felt honest. Daniel slipped his hands into his coat pockets. You always did enjoy turning small problems into mysteries. Caleb finally looked directly at him then. Calm. Unblinking. And you always enjoyed hiding large problems inside small lies. Maya looked up at her father with quiet surprise. She had never heard his voice sound that cold before. Evelyn noticed that too. Not rage. Hurt. Old hurt. Daniel's expression hardened slightly around the edges. I came to help. Caleb nodded once. That usually means trouble is already here. The manager cleared his throat nervously again. Maybe tonight is not the time for personal disagreements. But nobody listened. Evelyn stepped closer toward the workbench, eyes still on Daniel. Did you work on my car 3 weeks ago? Daniel answered smoothly. Briefly. Did you install this tracker? Of course not. The denial came quickly. Too quickly. Caleb noticed it immediately. Years earlier, Daniel Mercer had lied exactly the same way. Fast answers. Calm face. Eyes that shifted a fraction too late. Caleb felt an old exhaustion settle into his chest. He had spent years trying to leave certain memories buried beside hospital bills and sleepless nights. Yet here Daniel stood again beneath cold fluorescent lights like the past had simply been waiting for the right moment to return. Then Maya tugged gently on Caleb's sleeve and whispered something so softly only he could hear it at first. But the expression on his face changed immediately. "Daddy," she repeated louder this time, pointing toward Daniel's silver watch, "that is the same watch the man wore at Mom's funeral." The garage went completely still after Maya spoke. Even the rain outside seemed quieter somehow. Daniel instinctively touched the silver watch at his wrist before catching himself too late. Caleb noticed that small movement immediately. So did Evelyn. Maya clutched the strap of her backpack tighter, suddenly unsure why the adults looked frozen. Caleb rested one grease-stained hand gently against her shoulder without taking his eyes off Daniel. "Go sit by the toolbox for me, baby," he said softly. Maya obeyed without another word. She had learned long ago that her father's calm voice usually meant something serious was happening underneath it. Daniel forced a thin smile that did not reach his eyes. Children remember strange things. Caleb nodded slowly. Sometimes they remember the right things. Evelyn looked between both men carefully now. The fluorescent lights cast pale reflections across the wet showroom glass while distant traffic moved through the city beyond them. Everything felt suspended inside the service bay. Daniel adjusted his coat cuff. "I came to check on Evelyn's car, not revisit old memories." "Funny," Caleb replied quietly. "Old memories seem to keep finding you." The manager disappeared into the office completely after that, pretending paperwork suddenly required his full attention. Nobody blamed him. Daniel stepped closer to the workbench where the tracker still sat sealed inside the plastic container. "You are making dangerous assumptions." Caleb met his gaze evenly. "No. I stopped making assumptions after my wife died." The sentence landed hard. Evelyn felt it immediately. Daniel's jaw shifted slightly. The first real crack in his polished composure all night. Caleb rarely spoke directly about Angela anymore. Even hearing her mentioned aloud made his chest feel heavy. He remembered hospital corridors smelling like antiseptic and stale coffee. Bills folded inside kitchen drawers. Maya sleeping in plastic waiting room chairs. Daniel Mercer promising he would help with insurance paperwork before disappearing the second things became complicated. Caleb had buried that bitterness years ago because anger did not feed children or keep lights on. But grief remembered everything. Evelyn's voice lowered carefully. "Your wife knew him." Caleb looked toward the rain-covered windows for a moment before answering. "She trusted him." Daniel exhaled sharply through his nose. "That is not fair." Caleb gave a tired half-smile without warmth. "Life usually is not." Silence stretched again. Maya colored quietly beside the toolbox now, but every so often she glanced nervously toward her father. Evelyn noticed how Caleb kept his body slightly angled toward his daughter even during confrontation. Protective by instinct. Always aware of where she was. Daniel suddenly shifted his attention toward Evelyn, trying to regain control of the conversation. "Your car will be ready by morning. I will personally oversee everything." Evelyn did not answer immediately. Earlier that day she would have trusted Daniel automatically. He moved in her world. Spoke her language. Wore confidence like tailored fabric. But Caleb's quiet honesty had started exposing something she could not ignore anymore. She looked toward the tracker again. Then toward the damaged brake line beneath the open hood. "No," she said finally. "Caleb finishes the work." Daniel stared at her in disbelief for half a second. "You are choosing a mechanic over my team?" Caleb immediately stepped back from the tension. "Miss Hart, this does not need to become personal." Evelyn looked at him then. Really looked at him. Grease on his sleeves. Exhaustion beneath his eyes. The old lunchbox beside his toolbox because he had not stopped long enough to eat dinner. It already became personal when somebody attached a tracker to my car. Daniel's expression cooled instantly. The warmth vanished completely now. You always were too trusting, Evelyn. Caleb noticed her reaction to that sentence. A flicker. Small, but real. Like Daniel had crossed a line invisible to everyone except her. Then the service office printer suddenly started spitting out pages again behind them. The manager cursed softly from inside the office. Caleb turned casually toward the sound at first. Then he froze. Because printed across the top of the new invoice stack was Evelyn Hart's name beside a second vehicle registration number. One Caleb recognized instantly. His old pickup truck. Caleb stared at the invoice in silence while the printer continued humming inside the service office. His old pickup truck registration number sat directly beneath Evelyn Hart's name in black ink. Clean. Official. Impossible to ignore. The rain outside had slowed to a faint mist now, leaving silver streaks across the dealership windows and reflections trembling across the polished floor. Daniel noticed Caleb's expression immediately. What is it? Evelyn asked, stepping closer. Caleb picked up the invoice carefully, like touching it too fast might somehow make the words more real. This truck number, he said quietly. It is mine. Evelyn frowned. Why would my account be connected to your vehicle? Nobody answered. Even Daniel looked genuinely caught off guard for the first time all night. Caleb studied the page again. Service authorization requests. Internal access logs. A scheduled inspection for his pickup dated 3 weeks earlier. The same week Evelyn's SUV had first been serviced. Caleb's chest tightened slowly. I never brought my truck here. Daniel took a step forward. Let me see that. Caleb folded the paper once before handing it over. Calm. Controlled. But Evelyn noticed the tension in his fingers now. Daniel scanned the page quickly, too quickly. Probably an administrative error. Caleb gave a faint humorless smile. A lot of strange errors tonight. Maya looked up from beside the toolbox. Daddy, is our truck in trouble too? Caleb immediately softened again when he looked at her. No, baby. Promise? He crouched slightly beside her chair despite the exhaustion weighing across his shoulders. I promise. Evelyn watched that moment quietly. The way his entire voice changed for his daughter. The way he protected her from fear even while his own mind clearly raced beneath the surface. It affected her more than she wanted to admit. Daniel handed the invoice back. This does not prove anything. Caleb nodded once. No. But it asks questions. Daniel's patience thinned visibly now. You always did this. Turning coincidence into conspiracy. Caleb looked at him steadily beneath the cold garage lights. You always hated when people noticed details. Silence followed again. The manager peeked nervously from the office doorway before retreating the second nobody acknowledged him. Evelyn folded her arms tightly, her polished composure beginning to crack under the weight of too many strange connections. I want answers, she said finally. Daniel adjusted the cuff of his expensive coat. And you will get them. But not from a mechanic chasing ghosts from 10 years ago. The words landed harder than intended. Caleb's expression barely changed, but Evelyn saw the hurt pass through his eyes anyway. Quick. Controlled. Human. Maya heard it too. My daddy does not chase ghosts, she said softly from the stool. He fixes things. The room went quiet after that. Daniel looked uncomfortable for the first time since arriving. Not because of Caleb. Because of the child watching him. Children had a way of making polished adults feel exposed. Caleb rested one hand gently on Maya's shoulder without looking at her. A silent thank you. Evelyn's phone vibrated again inside her purse. This time she checked it. A message from her head of security asking if she had arrived home safely. Her eyes narrowed slightly. She had never told anyone she was staying late at the dealership. Slowly, she looked back toward the tiny tracker sealed inside Caleb's plastic container. Then toward Daniel. "Who else knew where I was tonight?" she asked quietly. Daniel's expression hardened instantly. "Evelyn. Answer me." Caleb stayed silent beside the SUV, but every instinct in him had already shifted into quiet alertness. He noticed the way Daniel's jaw tightened. The way his eyes moved briefly toward the front windows. Like he was calculating exits instead of answers. Then headlights suddenly swept across the rain-dark parking lot outside the dealership. A black SUV pulled slowly beside Caleb's old pickup truck and parked without turning off the engine. Caleb noticed it first. And the second he saw the driver step out wearing dark gloves despite the warm night air, something deep in his chest told him this night was about to become far more dangerous than any of them expected. The black SUV outside remained idling beside Caleb's old pickup truck, exhaust curling into the damp night air beneath the parking lot lights. Inside the dealership, nobody moved for a moment. Caleb stood perfectly still near the service bay, one hand resting lightly against Maya's shoulder while his eyes tracked the figure stepping out of the vehicle. Dark gloves. Baseball cap pulled low. Calm movements that felt too deliberate to be accidental. Evelyn noticed Caleb's posture change instantly. Subtle, but unmistakable. Every part of him had shifted into quiet awareness. "Do you know him?" she whispered. Caleb did not answer immediately. "No," he said finally. "But I know trouble when it walks slowly." Daniel gave a strained laugh that fooled nobody now. "You are being paranoid." Caleb kept his eyes toward the parking lot windows. "Maybe." The man outside circled once around Caleb's pickup truck without approaching the dealership entrance. Just observing. Watching. Rainwater glistened across the hood beneath pale overhead lights. Maya instinctively grabbed her father's sleeve tighter. "Daddy," Caleb crouched beside her immediately. "Hey," he said softly. "Look at me." She did. "I need you to stay near the toolbox for a minute, okay? Are we in danger?" The question landed quietly in the room. Evelyn felt something twist painfully inside her chest hearing it come from a child's voice. Caleb brushed a loose braid gently behind Maya's ear. "Not while I am here." Simple words. Absolute certainty. Maya nodded because she believed him completely. Evelyn noticed that too. That kind of trust could not be performed. It had to be earned through years of showing up. Outside, the man stopped beside the pickup truck and glanced toward the dealership windows briefly. Caleb recognized the movement immediately. Not the face. The behavior. Somebody checking sightlines. Somebody trained to stay aware of exits. His stomach tightened slowly. Daniel stepped toward Evelyn again. "You should leave now." Caleb's eyes finally snapped toward him. "No," the word came sharp enough to freeze the room. Daniel frowned. "Excuse me." Caleb straightened slowly, exhaustion and restraint mixing beneath the fluorescent lights. If someone attached a tracker to her vehicle, leaving alone is exactly what she should not do. Daniel's jaw tightened. "You are not security." "No," Caleb said calmly. "I am a father. Which means I notice danger early because I cannot afford not to." Silence followed. Heavy this time. Evelyn looked at Caleb differently again after that sentence. Every instinct she trusted in business told her he was right. Not because he sounded impressive. Because he sounded honest. The man outside suddenly reached into his jacket pocket. Maya flinched softly beside the toolbox. Caleb immediately shifted slightly in front of her without even thinking about it. Protective by instinct. Always. But instead of a weapon, the man pulled out a phone and took a photo of Caleb's pickup truck. Then another toward the dealership windows. Evelyn's expression hardened instantly. Why would somebody photograph his truck? Caleb already knew the answer that frightened him most. Because this was no longer only about Evelyn Hart. Somehow Maya and he had become part of it too. Daniel rubbed one hand across his face, frustration slipping through his polished mask for the first time. This is escalating into something unnecessary. Caleb looked at him evenly. Funny. It escalated the second someone connected her account to my truck. Daniel did not answer. Outside, the stranger finally turned and walked back toward the black SUV. But before climbing inside, he paused beside Caleb's truck one last time and slid something beneath the windshield wiper. Then he drove away into the rain-dark street without ever entering the building. Nobody breathed normally again until the taillights disappeared. Evelyn looked toward Caleb immediately. Do not touch it alone. Caleb nodded once. I was not planning to. He grabbed a flashlight from his toolbox and walked toward the front entrance carefully while Maya stayed close behind him despite his quiet protests. Evelyn followed too. So did Daniel, though far less willingly. The cool night air swept across them the second the dealership doors opened. Caleb approached the pickup slowly beneath the pale parking lot lights and lifted the folded paper from beneath the windshield wiper. His expression changed the instant he opened it. Evelyn saw the color drain from his face. What is it? She asked quietly. Caleb looked first toward Maya. Then toward Daniel. Then finally handed the note to Evelyn without a word. Written across the paper in black marker were only 6 words. You should have let her die. The note trembled slightly in Evelyn's hand as rain mist drifted across the parking lot. Pale overhead lights reflected off the wet pavement while the city hummed quietly somewhere beyond the dealership gates. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Caleb stood beside his old pickup truck with one arm subtly angled behind Maya, shielding her from words she was too young to fully understand. Daniel stared at the message with a tight jaw and unreadable eyes. Evelyn finally looked up slowly. What does this mean? Caleb exhaled through his nose, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with work anymore. I do not know. But part of him did. Or at least part of him feared he did. The sentence on the paper clawed open memories he had spent years forcing into silence. Hospital corridors at 2 a.m. Angela asleep beneath thin blankets while machines beeped softly beside her bed. Daniel Mercer promising experimental treatment connections that never came through. Caleb had blamed the healthcare system. The money. Fate. Anything except the possibility that someone had intentionally failed them. Because that thought was too dark to survive while raising a child alone. Maya looked up at her father carefully. Daddy? Caleb folded the note before she could read it again. It is nothing you need to worry about. But your eyes look sad. Evelyn felt her chest tighten hearing that. Children always saw the truth first. Caleb managed a small tired smile for Maya anyway. That happens sometimes when grown-ups are confused. Daniel suddenly stepped forward. This is getting out of control. Caleb looked at him calmly. You keep saying that like control belonged to you in the first place. The rain picked up slightly around them, tapping against the hood of the pickup truck. Evelyn wrapped her coat tighter around herself, but she barely noticed the cold anymore. Her attention stayed fixed on Caleb. Most men she knew became louder when frightened. Caleb became quieter. More careful. That frightened her more than shouting ever could. We should call the police, she said finally. Daniel answered too quickly. No. The single word echoed sharply in the damp night air. Everyone looked at him. Daniel adjusted immediately. I mean, there is no proof of anything criminal yet. Caleb noticed the slip. So did Evelyn. A tracker attached to my vehicle, she said slowly, and a threat left on his truck sounds criminal enough for me. Daniel rubbed one hand across his face again. For the first time all night, he looked less polished. Less composed. Human cracks starting to show beneath expensive fabric and rehearsed confidence. Caleb opened the passenger door of his pickup and handed Maya her small blanket from inside. "Wrap up, baby." She obeyed quietly, still watching all the adults with uncertain eyes. Evelyn glanced into the truck as the door opened wider. Fast food napkins. School books. A tiny pair of sneakers near the floorboard. A photograph taped beside the dashboard showing Caleb, Maya, and a smiling woman with warm eyes she instantly recognized as Angela. Ordinary life. Honest life. Not curated. Not polished. Real. Something about it hit her harder than she expected. Daniel noticed Evelyn staring inside the truck and immediately looked irritated by it. "You should go home," he told her again, softer this time. But Evelyn did not move. "Why are you so desperate to separate us tonight?" The question landed directly between them. Daniel opened his mouth, then stopped. Caleb watched him carefully beneath the rain-speckled lights. Years ago Daniel had mastered the art of answering difficult questions with charm. Tonight that charm kept slipping. A security gate rattled softly somewhere near the edge of the property as wind moved through the empty lot. Maya suddenly pointed toward the dealership building behind them. "Daddy," she whispered nervously. "Somebody is inside." Everyone turned immediately. Through the service bay windows, a shadow moved quickly between the rows of vehicles beneath the fluorescent lights. Not an employee. Too fast. Too careful. Caleb's expression changed instantly. He stepped slightly in front of Maya again without thinking. Evelyn felt her pulse spike beside him. Then the service bay lights abruptly shut off one entire row at a time until half the garage disappeared into darkness. And somewhere inside the building, metal crashed loudly against concrete. The sound of metal crashing inside the darkened service bay echoed through the dealership like a warning shot nobody wanted to understand. Maya flinched beside Caleb immediately. Without hesitation, he pulled her gently behind him, one arm shielding her small frame while his eyes locked onto the shadows moving between the vehicles inside. Half the fluorescent lights had gone dead now, leaving long stretches of darkness across the garage floor. Rain tapped steadily against the glass walls while somewhere deeper in the building, something rolled across concrete with a hollow clatter. Daniel cursed under his breath. Evelyn's pulse hammered hard enough she could hear it. "Was somebody still inside?" she asked sharply. The manager rushed toward the entrance from the office looking pale. "No. Everyone left an hour ago." Caleb never took his eyes off the service bay. "Then somebody stayed." His voice remained low. Controlled. But Evelyn noticed his posture immediately. Alert. Focused. Like a man who had spent years preparing himself for emergencies nobody else noticed coming. Daniel stepped toward the entrance. "I will check it out." Caleb grabbed his arm before he could move farther. Not aggressively. Firmly. Daniel looked down at the grease-stained hand gripping his expensive sleeve. "Let go." Caleb's eyes stayed fixed on the darkness inside. "Too loud." "Excuse me." "Whoever is in there wants attention." Walking straight in gives it to them. Evelyn stared at Caleb in surprise again. He was thinking several steps ahead while everyone else reacted emotionally. Daniel pulled free from Caleb's grip with visible irritation. "You are a mechanic, not law enforcement." Caleb nodded once. "Exactly why I still want everyone alive." The sentence silenced him. Maya tugged lightly at Caleb's jacket. "Daddy, I am scared." Caleb crouched instantly despite never taking his eyes fully off the building. "I know, baby. Are we going home?" His expression softened for her even with tension burning beneath it. "Soon." Evelyn watched him carefully. Fear was everywhere around them now. But Caleb kept making space for gentleness anyway. She could not stop noticing that. The service bay lights flickered once more. Then another loud crash echoed from deeper inside the garage. The manager nearly jumped out of his skin. Daniel looked frustrated now instead of confident. Evelyn pulled out her phone. "I am calling security." Caleb finally looked toward her directly. "Tell them not to use sirens when they arrive." She blinked. "Why?" "Because if this is connected to the tracker, loud entrances only push people into hiding." Again, calm. Strategic. Quietly intelligent. Evelyn gave a small nod and made the call exactly as he instructed. Daniel noticed that too. The shift in trust between them. And he clearly did not like it. Caleb slowly moved toward the dealership entrance while keeping Maya behind him. "Stay here," Evelyn said suddenly. Caleb paused. "What? You do not know who is inside." Caleb looked toward Maya before answering. "That is exactly why I need to know." He handed Maya the old flashlight from his toolbox. "Hold this for me, baby." She clutched it tightly with both hands. "Please be careful." Caleb gave her a faint smile. "Always." Then he stepped carefully into the dim service bay alone. The air inside smelled like motor oil, rainwater, and electrical heat from the flickering fluorescent fixtures overhead. Shadows stretched long between expensive vehicles lined across the garage floor. Somewhere ahead, a faint scraping sound moved behind the rows of parked cars. Caleb walked slowly, eyes adjusting to the darkness. Every movement deliberate. No wasted motion. Behind him, Evelyn ignored Daniel calling her name and followed several steps inside too. Caleb noticed immediately. "You should stay back." "You already told me what not to do," she whispered. "Now tell me what you see." He listened carefully for another sound before answering. Whoever came in here knew exactly where the cameras were. Evelyn felt cold move through her chest hearing that. Caleb pointed toward the ceiling where several security cameras now hung angled uselessly toward the walls instead of the garage floor. Deliberately repositioned. Not broken. Planned. Then a phone screen suddenly lit up for one brief second near the far end of the service bay. Just enough light for Caleb to catch the reflection of a familiar silver watch before the darkness swallowed the figure again. The faint reflection of the silver watch disappeared into darkness almost immediately, but Caleb had already seen enough. His stomach tightened beneath the old work shirt as rain rattled softly against the high service bay windows. Evelyn stood a few feet behind him, breathing quieter now, trying not to make unnecessary noise. Somewhere outside, Maya waited near the entrance clutching the flashlight with both hands while Daniel remained by the doorway pretending calm he no longer fully controlled. Caleb moved slowly between the parked vehicles, boots silent against the concrete floor. "You saw it too, did you not?" Evelyn whispered. Caleb nodded once without looking back. "Silver watch. Daniel's?" "Maybe." The answer came carefully. Too carefully. Evelyn felt frustration rise in her chest. "You keep doing that." Caleb stopped beside a dark SUV, eyes scanning reflections in the glass. "Doing what?" "Protecting people who do not deserve it." Caleb lowered his voice even further. "No. I protect facts until I understand them." That answer unsettled her because it sounded wiser than anything she had heard from her own executives in years. Somewhere deeper inside the garage, a metal drawer slammed shut. Caleb immediately lifted one hand slightly toward Evelyn without thinking, signaling her to stay behind him. She noticed the instinctive gesture. Protective again. Always. They moved farther into the dim service bay together while flickering fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like tired insects. Caleb's eyes adjusted quickly to the darkness. Years working late shifts had trained him to notice details others missed. A toolbox left open. Tire marks near the rear exit. Fresh rainwater footprints leading toward the security office hallway. Then he noticed something else. One of the dealership computers near the back diagnostic station was still on. The screen glowed faint blue in the dark. Caleb approached carefully. Evelyn followed close enough now to smell grease and rainwater clinging to his jacket. The monitor displayed security camera footage from earlier that evening. Several video files were open at once. Someone had been reviewing them recently. Caleb touched the mouse gently. The cursor moved immediately. Not asleep. Active. Evelyn's pulse quickened. Can you see who accessed it? Caleb scanned the screen quietly. His brow tightened. No login history. Then he noticed a folder on the desktop labeled Vehicle Tracking. Evelyn stepped closer beside him. Open it. Caleb hesitated only briefly before clicking. A long list of license plates appeared across the screen beside timestamps and GPS coordinates. Evelyn's SUV was there. So was Caleb's pickup truck. And dozens of others. My God, Evelyn whispered. Caleb kept reading silently, his expression growing colder with every line. This is not random. What is it? Someone has been tracking customer vehicles through the dealership service department. Evelyn felt genuine fear move through her now. Not business anxiety. Real fear. Why? Caleb scrolled farther. Several entries included handwritten notes scanned into the files. Delivery schedules. Meeting locations. Personal routines. Somebody had turned customer service records into surveillance. Then one file caught Caleb's attention completely. Angela Brooks. His hand froze on the mouse. Evelyn saw the color drain from his face again. Caleb, slowly, he opened the file. A photograph of Angela appeared on screen beside hospital appointment records and vehicle tracking logs from years earlier. Evelyn covered her mouth softly. Why would they have this? Caleb could barely hear her anymore. The world narrowed into the blue light of the monitor and his late wife's smiling face staring back at him from a file that should not exist. Notes filled the screen beneath her name. Medical visits. Travel routes. Dates. Observations. Someone had monitored Angela long before she died. Caleb's breathing slowed dangerously quiet. The kind of silence that came when grief collided with truth. Evelyn looked at him carefully now, realizing this night was no longer only about her safety or Daniel Mercer or a damaged SUV. It was about something far older and crueler buried beneath years of lies. Then footsteps suddenly echoed behind them in the darkness. Caleb turned instantly, placing himself between Evelyn and the hallway without hesitation. A figure emerged slowly beneath the flickering lights. Not Daniel. The dealership manager. Pale. Sweating. Terrified. You were not supposed to find that file, he whispered. The dealership manager stood frozen beneath the flickering fluorescent lights, his pale face slick with sweat while the blue glow of the computer monitor reflected across his trembling eyes. Caleb remained directly in front of Evelyn without even realizing he had moved there. Protective instinct again. Always. The file containing Angela's name still glowed on the screen behind him like an old wound finally ripped open. Rain hammered harder against the windows now, the storm outside growing heavier as if the night itself understood something had broken loose. What do you mean we were not supposed to find it? Evelyn asked sharply. The manager swallowed hard. You need to close that file right now. Caleb's voice stayed low. Dangerously calm. No, the manager looked toward the hallway nervously, then back toward the monitor. You do not understand who is connected to this. Then help us understand, Evelyn said. The man shook his head immediately. I cannot. Caleb stepped slightly closer. Not threatening. Steady. You tracked my wife. The manager's eyes flickered toward the photograph on the screen. Guilt flashed across his face before fear swallowed it again. I never touched her file personally. But you knew it existed. Silence answered him. Caleb stared at the monitor again. Angela smiling beside medical records somebody had monitored without consent. Hospital visits mapped like delivery routes. Notes typed by strangers while she fought for her life. The grief hit him strangely. Not explosive. Hollow. Like standing inside an empty church after everyone else had gone home. Evelyn watched his face carefully. She realized then that Caleb was carrying something heavier than anger. Betrayal. The kind that reshaped a person quietly over years. Who created these files? She asked softly. The manager rubbed both hands across his face. It started as customer analytics. This is not analytics, Caleb said. This is surveillance. The manager nodded weakly. At first it was only location tracking for high-profile clients. Security patterns. Vehicle recovery. But then people realized the information was valuable. Evelyn felt cold move down her spine. Valuable to who? Before the manager could answer, footsteps echoed sharply from the hallway behind him. Everyone turned instantly. Daniel Mercer appeared from the darkness near the rear offices, coat damp from rain, silver watch catching the flickering overhead light again. But this time his expression carried no charm at all. Only exhaustion. Enough, he said quietly. The manager visibly flinched. Caleb's eyes narrowed. Evelyn stared at Daniel like she was finally seeing the real man beneath years of polished confidence. Daniel looked toward the open file on the monitor and closed his eyes briefly. I told them years ago to erase Angela's records. Caleb's jaw tightened hard enough to ache. You knew. Daniel met his gaze directly for the first time all night. Not everything. But enough. Silence settled heavily through the dark service bay. Maya's small voice suddenly echoed from near the entrance. Daddy? Caleb turned immediately. She stood holding the flashlight beside the doorway, blanket wrapped around her shoulders, frightened eyes searching for him through the dim garage. Caleb crossed the space toward her without hesitation. No matter what truths shattered around him tonight, she still came first. Always. He crouched beside her gently. You okay, baby? She nodded uncertainly. The lady security guard is here. Caleb looked toward the front showroom where flashing blue security lights reflected faintly across the wet marble floor outside. More guards were arriving now. More witnesses. More questions. Behind him, Evelyn slowly stepped closer to Daniel. Tell me the truth, she whispered. Daniel looked older suddenly beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. The dealership was never the real business. Caleb heard that sentence from across the room and slowly stood again. Rain thundered against the roof overhead while the blue security lights pulsed through the darkened garage. Daniel looked toward Caleb with something almost like regret in his eyes. Angela discovered something she was never supposed to see, he said quietly.